So long-run models are also sometimes referred to as flexible price models. How long does it take for the prices to adjust so that we get to equilibrium? Now, if we have flexible price models, as we've been discussing up until today, then we also can invoke the classical dichotomy in the long-run neutrality of money. So notice that if we're talking about flexible price models, one of the things we know, monetary policy does not matter. Monetary policy cannot affect any real variables. It doesn't affect labor, capital, total factor productivity, doesn't affect economic output, it doesn't affect anything in the long run. Right? So all of that would hold. Now, in the short run, and what we mean by the short run is that there are at least some markets that are not in equilibrium. In other words, the price is not at its equilibrium level. There's not enough time yet for it to move to an equilibrium level. So because it hasn't had enough time to move to that level, we talk in this time period as prices being sticky. Right? They're sticky to adjust or slow to adjust to their equilibrium levels. So these are also, any class of models that falls into this category would be referred to as a sticky price model. In this case, once prices are sticky, the classical dichotomy breaks down. The long-run neutrality of money breaks down. So now you can see exactly what having a flexible price model or a sticky price model might mean. Monetary policy has no effect in a flexible price model, but might have an effect in a sticky price model. So we need to think about those kinds of things. Now, in economics, there are two major schools of thought, lots of variations on the theme, but two major schools of thought, which are the classical school of thought and the Keynesian school. Now, the classical school, if you remember the video that we looked at on day one, would have been represented by Friedrich von Hayek. And the Keynesian school would have been represented by John Maynard Keynes. And while that video may not have made a whole lot of sense to you on day one, hopefully when we look at it again, and we will, it'll make much more sense to you later. So classical models are almost by definition long-run models. So in the long run, we have flexible prices. Flexible prices means that markets will move to equilibrium. Now, one of the keys for many classical economists, not all, but many classical economists, is that movement to equilibrium actually takes place fairly quickly. Remember those recessions only last on average about a year? And even the longest one's only been a year and a half. So it looks like maybe the economy moves back to equilibrium pretty quickly in the course of a couple of years. And if the economy is going to move back to equilibrium pretty quickly on its own, then there's not much of a role for either monetary or fiscal policy to play in stabilization policy, in stabilizing the economy. Which means then that in the context of flexible price models, government policy should be focused on promoting long-run economic growth. Growth of the labor force, the capital stock, and total factor productivity. Now, a Keynesian would argue, well, wait a minute. Let's think about some short-run models where prices are sticky. And when prices are sticky, we want to know how long can they be sticky? How long can markets be out of equilibrium? In other words, rather than emphasizing how quickly markets move to equilibrium, a Keynesian economist would argue that how slowly do markets move to new equilibriums? If they move fairly slowly, then there may be a role for government policy to move us back to equilibrium more quickly. That's not instead of thinking about long-run economic growth, but in addition to thinking about long-run economic growth. So let me give you an example of these two that maybe you can relate to. Rumor on campus is that you all had a really hard exam on Tuesday, and that there's a big weekend coming up, and you need to blow off a little steam and frustration. So some of you, some students on campus, I'm sure none of you would do this, might party a little extra hearty this weekend, a little bit of overindulgence. And you realize that, gosh, when you wake up on Monday morning, you've really got a blinding, splitting headache, right? Now, you could do a couple of things. You could say, now I know this headache's going to go away on its own. Right? Given enough time, the headache will go away. Okay? How much time? I don't know. It's the long run. Right? Now, you also know that on Tuesday afternoon, you've got to go back to 100B class. And you go, I really don't want to go there with a headache because the professor already gives me a headache, so there's no sense piling a new one on an old one. So maybe I'll take some medicine in the form of aspirin to try to get this headache to go away more quickly. Right? In other words, you don't want to wait for the long-run solution. You want to try to get back to equilibrium more quickly.